Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you.
Good evening.
Amy. Janine.
Hey.
We have quorum if you want to start.
Okay, I'm going to give it just another minute.
Coming up.
All right, so it looks like we've got just about everybody now. A few exceptions. Welcome. It's tonight's our September 15th, 2020 Executive Committee meeting. Bob didn't send out an agenda, but like I usually do, I'm going to propose the agenda, which is attendance, the chair's report, district manager's report, calendar review, committee reports, old business and new business. Does that sound good to everybody? Somebody like to second that?
Sounds good.
Okay, so that's going to be our agenda. So I guess we'll start with the attendance. Amy, do you want to just do it by site?
I can do it by site unless somebody wants me to call out their name. I'm happy to do it.
Okay, I think we're in good shape with that.
Yeah.
Note that we have one visitor in addition to that with us. So I'm going to start. So the the biggest thing that I've noticed in the last week is sanitation issues. I'm not sure if that's something that everybody else has started to notice. The corner bins are really beginning to be a big issue. And from my personal observation, it seems to be that's the case because people are bringing household trash out to the corners and piling it up. And I'm not sure what we can do about that, but I'd been talking to Bob about maybe starting to promote the Adopt a Garbage Can program and just getting the garbage bagged up, because the biggest result of this is trash that's blowing around. The sanitation department, from my understanding, has cut the garbage can pickup to once a day, Monday through Saturday, with no pickups on Sunday. And as a result, the trash bags get ripped open if people are bringing their household trash out, and blows all around. And it's really difficult to clean it up once that starts happening, because it gets stuck in everything, down the street. So I was going to try to get more information on adopting the garbage cans and getting that information on that out there for people to be aware of. And also, I think as we discuss some of the street dining in the roadbed, putting responsibility on some of the business owners to clean within 20 feet of any physical structures, just because the mechanical brooms can't get in and turn in and clean the gutters unless they've got some distance. Bob, maybe you can find out what the actual distance is. And also, I know that Corey's office has been going out with some of the block associations and doing neighborhood cleanups, but we also want to get information out to community groups on how they can do that. From my perspective, that's the first visible sign of the city cuts that we're seeing and having a direct impact. And I know that it's affected, starting to impact the parks as well. But I'm seeing in the chat, it's not all household trash, but the problem is that once a couple of bags or small things from households go in, it fills up the bins, and that doesn't leave room for anything else. I mean, I've watched people do it, come out of buildings. So it's a little bit frustrating. As far as some other updates, the Open Streets Restaurants program, the DOT has advised the participants in that they can apply for 7 days a week. We don't know what the criteria is for having those closed 7 days a week. I guess they're in the process of reviewing that. So that's a good step. I mean, it's very beneficial for some streets, not so much for others. One of the issues which I know has been brought up, and we're trying to get a little bit more clarity from DOT, is on movement through streets that have all the built out structures. The sanitation trucks are having trouble moving through there, the fire trucks. And so as we move forward into the colder months, figuring out if there are any ways to sort of modify that so there's just a little bit more room, especially right now. I bet on a lot of the areas that you couldn't run a plow through them because the plows are too wide. So it's just something we want to get in place, because as everybody knows, we've got nice winter days when outdoor dining is still very viable. We just want a setup that's in place that can last through the time period that is permitted by the mayor's office. I think that's pretty much the main topics that I wanted to cover. I know Bob's going to cover the other topics I had, and specifically he's going to share the information on Tom Connor's memorial service. His niece had reached out to us with those details, so I'll be emailing that to the board. And I think that as we go through the committee reports, obviously some of the different issues that are at the forefront will come up as we do that. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Carter. First, just since you mentioned towards the end of the report about snowplows and the narrow streets and the build outs from the open restaurants, I just want to mention that is something specifically that the district superintendent mentioned at my district service cabinet meeting, that he is concerned that once the snow comes, that there are some streets that'll be impossible for a snowplow to go down. So, I think we really need to get DOT and some of these other agencies, like specifically sanitation and the fire department, to engage in conversations so they're on the same page. Because the buzz, I kind of feel like DOT's been a little behind the curve on responding to some of the concerns of their sister agencies. Just a couple of other things I'll mention.
This would be nice. Good, just when I
Someone
was
needs to mute themselves.
Good. That's nice.
Okay. Just a couple of other things that came up at my meeting. Anyone who lives near the West 3rd Street between McDougal and LaGuardia, you know that there's been a water main installation over there. That work has been on pause for about a month now because Con Ed's been involved with doing some of their own work on Thompson and West 3rd, but they're supposed to be finished with that this week. Also at my meeting, several of the bids mentioned just another issue that's seems to have gotten worse over the past several months. Several bids reported an uptick in graffiti, and I think one of the things that may be exacerbating it is that the city program to remove graffiti has been ended as part of the budget cuts. So there's one more ramification of the pandemic. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about budget priorities and district needs statements. I've mentioned it a few times over the past several months, but we're in crunch time now, and I think social services will have it on their agenda at the end of September, but all your committees will have it on in October. Once again, you might want to share the district needs statement and the budget priorities are on the website. They're in the district profile section. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call about that. I would ask you to have them to me by Sunday, October 18th, so I can kind of organize them and get them to everyone with as much notice, with much time before the executive committee meeting on Tuesday, the 20th, so we can all kind of review them and have time to kind of discuss them at the exec committee meeting. And lastly, I just want to, as Ricardo mentioned, Greenwich House has scheduled or arranged a virtual memorial service for Tom Connor. It's going to be on Wednesday, September 23rd at 7 p.m. Tomorrow, I'll forward the email that I got from Greenwich House so that everyone will be fully aware of that event. That's it.
Great, thanks, Bob. I just put into the chat the link to the district needs and budget priorities on the board website. And if anybody wants to discuss that or wants some more information, Bob and I can be happy to talk to you about that and work with you before the committee meetings.
Before we move on, Carter, just one more thing about our budget requests and priorities. Of all you chairs, when you look at the budget requests from last year, make sure you take a look at the agency response. In particular, because some of the requests that we made, the response was that the agency was basically had no response. For example, one that sticks in my head, I think for the past 2 or 3 years, or maybe even more, we've asked for we've had a capital budget request regarding Hudson Square Park. The response from the Parks Department was, we have nothing to do with Hudson Square Park. So that's one, I'm not quite sure. I mean, if we leave it in there, we're not going to get a city response because there's no city agency that oversees Hudson Square Park. We could leave it in there if we just want to make a statement, I guess, but we're not going to be in a position to kind of hold anyone's feet to the fire on a request like that. And there's more than one where we got an answer like that. So if that's the case, we might either want to rethink the request itself, or I don't know, or think of another way to propose it, I guess.
I have a question about that. So there are some things like the park that they go to the mayor's office, I would think. You know, they don't go to agencies. Are there things that, I mean, are we really writing for agencies, or is there any other body we're writing for?
Well, most of the requests go to agencies, but that's a fair point. And I think for something like Hudson River Park, you know, I mean, I guess I should talk to, or can talk to OMB about that, because they, you know, if there's a, when they give us a, there's a list of agency codes when we're putting the priorities in, and there isn't one for the mayor's office. But we've had agencies in the past where there was no code, and they created one for us. For example, I think we started, I think 2 years ago, Joe's Quality of Life Committee requested an increase in their budget so they could hire more inspectors. It's the Street Activity Permit Office. They didn't have a code for safe hall, but now they do, because we made a request particularly to that agency. So if something is beyond a specific agency, maybe the mayor's office is where it should go. I don't know, but it's worth asking.
Yeah, and that's sort of a follow-up question, Bob. Maybe since I know you've been participating on a lot of calls regarding this, how do we balance out sort of the changes of what's happening now through the pandemic with the longer term needs, as far as when we're starting to see cuts or anticipate cuts? How do we register our priorities with respect to that? Because it's not typically how we would look at this, but if we want to have maintaining certain services a priority, I mean, is that appropriate to do, or how does that fit into this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I don't see that we change our approach too much, really. I mean, I think if something's important to our community as we see it, we ask for it. And then I think for lack of a better word, the battle to kind of get the monies into the budget is on a separate track. Once we put our request in, and then, you know, one of the things that we, Shirley Secunda has been really been the best over the years about requesting follow-up meetings with the agencies. But the budget process gives the community boards the right, the power to request a district meeting with city agencies to talk about our requests. So we, you know, that's a built-in part of the process that we've never really availed ourselves of in the past. But that might be a way to make our requests and then engage in a conversation with the agencies to let them know, one, how important a particular request is, and also how you know, what's the best way to get it, I guess. You know.
Janine, you had a question?
My question is for Reso-A funds for public schools. The money that was awarded last year will be released this winter. The money that was awarded in fiscal year 2019 is being held by the DOE and not being released to schools. I know Gail Brewer's written a letter on it. So we're sort of in a situation we could ask for more, but the schools aren't getting any. The DOE is holding on to that money. So I don't know if you've heard anything on this, but I can reach out to Brewer's office. But right now, that's the situation with schools.
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess we can have, you know, more detailed discussions about this. It's something I was going through, you know, I've told a few people here, I was going through some of the old board resolutions from the late 70s and early 80s, and you really see the cuts and, you know, the board starting to talk about taking up different issues. And, you know, going forward, it seems we may have some drastic cuts. And so it's better to be on the record as, you know, as people are making decisions about what we would like to see maintained and, you know, in other areas, because obviously it's a very big issue. Susanna? I was
just going to say that I think that you raise a really good point. I don't know if it becomes a preamble or whatever, or whether we bear maintenance in mind as we prioritize our requests. We've always requested for new expenditures. We haven't really asked for certain priorities to be preserved. But I mean, we will be coming together as a committee to discuss that. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, and that's an excellent point. I mean, we've had so much great work done on our parks and other areas that having them maintained is to make sure that they don't fall apart is maybe more important than some of the newer projects, right? I mean, but I guess that's the discussion we'll probably be having for a long time, you know, as a board. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so we're going to move on to the calendar. I think Bob had emailed it out. We still have a couple of committees that need dates, and so I think that Janet, you were looking for a date. I don't know if the 26th or the 27th work. Those are, you know, two open dates. And for parks and schools, did you guys work out how you guys want to do those two on that same night, or who wants to go first? What times? What works for you guys?
I think we can go first. Parks can go first. Yeah, Janine and I talked about it. I think it makes more sense for Parks to go first.
Do you want to do that? How long do you want to have allocated for your meeting?
5 to 6:30. Is that okay? Janine, was that all right?
Yeah, that sounds good. And then we'll go at 6:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yes, the 26th or 27th are fine. If it's okay, you know, we're going to be inviting some outside parties. So if I can have, you know, a week or two to nail that date down, that would be good.
Okay, Bob, that works, right? Okay. Oh, and then just you know, the bills that were pending, Janet, you know, having talked to a few people, without any money from the federal government, the bills are all just kind of not going anywhere. You know, because they all just as I don't know if that's an official position, but that's sort of the feedback that I've gotten, is that they all need some sort of funding to work. And since the federal government has sort of paused that conversation, I'm not sure people are advocating for any of those bills at the moment. So I think that your other topic's probably a much better topic. At this, unless we hear something. I mean, you know, miracles happen, I guess.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, I'll pursue, you know, somebody from Stringer's, their office, maybe to discuss their report and bring us some concrete, you know, there are a few points that they would like us, you know, to highlight for us.
Okay, and then Robin, did you guys want to meet next month?
Yeah, I actually had brought this up on a previous executive, I think. I mean, there's some challenges because it seemed, you know, a few things. First of all, my night is typically the first Tuesday of the month, but between the SLA committees seemingly combined, I don't know if that's continuing, so that makes a conflict. And then apparently, you know, with the Zoom restrictions of only having, so yeah, I mean, we need to meet because we have budget discussions, and Bob just mentioned he needed them by the 18th. I don't see any free dates. You know, I'm hoping my committee can meet on whatever we decide, because I haven't been able to tell them, you know, it's the middle of September now, and I don't know if they'll all be able to make whatever we decide, but yeah, I guess whatever scraps are left, I'll have to take. But ideally, I'd love to have a night, you know, a designated night, so they know what to count on, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, because a lot of the other committees were dealing with the issues that come from the city, you know, we have to have those dates, you know, pretty much set up because of the applicants.
Right. Well, I mean, this is going to be an ongoing thing. So, I mean, if we're going to be bouncing around, at least I would like to at least tell my committee that we no longer have an official night. I'm just going to have to tell them each time, sort of haphazardly, when we meet. At least that gives them a heads up, if that's what's going to have to happen.
I mean, I think at this point, I mean, I actually raised that with the borough president's office. We'll see if if we get any response from that. I'm not holding my breath on that. But I you know, maybe one of the nights with Joe, I'm not sure how much activity you guys are getting. I mean, that might be a night that could be shared between two committees, and that's the 5th. I mean, that's a possibility. And, you know, but at the same time, we had also, Bob Gormley and I have been discussing is that the quality of life might be, you know, with some of these issues, we might start bringing in the speakers like we had talked about before, maybe getting somebody from sanitation to come in and talk about what's going on with stuff like that. So I'm not sure on the timing, but that date could work, I would think, for both committees. Typically, you guys don't use a full, 2 or 3 hours, right? So.
No, I mean, I think we'll probably need an hour, but I mean, if you want us to start earlier, I don't know what people's work lives are like. I mean, we've typically always met at 6:30. I might not have everybody if we have to meet at 5:30, if quality of life goes at 6:30. So there's no perfect answer. I just want to make sure that there's a discussion of budget and district needs statement. I've already been in touch with my committee and sent them the documents to review and all that. So
So do you guys want to do that on the 5th, and we can work out the details with Bob?
I guess if that's it. I mean, I do need time to, I would want, get their recommendations included in the whatever I give to Bob, and so I'll need a little time for that. Yeah. Yeah, because we basically the discussion that we'll have on the 20th is with all the rolling up all the committees recommendations, right, Bob? That's the.
Yes.
So so you want them in advance so that you have the opportunity to collate them, put them together, and send them out, right? So.
Yes. Robin, beyond the budget stuff, do you have any agenda items?
Not right now. I mean, normally it would have, if we could have done a breakout, maybe we would have done it in September with the reopening working group. But at the same time, it looks like that night's going to be pretty full of museums at this point. So I'm not even sure if that would have been a good night anyway, because I think that might be a long evening. But yeah, at the moment, for now, October looks like it would just be the budget and district needs statement discussion.
Okay.
And then I guess, Susan, you're going to figure out your dates and work around as you go forward for October.
Yeah, I see that the 19th is open, so why don't we put something down for that? And then since we're meeting next week, I will discuss it with the group and see if we can fit something else in. We're pretty flexible. We may even opt to meet on a Friday. So I will see, but we're a small group, so so we'll try to get us, 2 meetings in the month at least.
Great.
But if you put us down for the 19th, we've got that already.
Okay. So basically we roughly have all the nights, and then Janet, you'll let us know if it's the 26th or 27th, right?
Yes.
Bob, did we cover everybody?
You didn't cover me.
Oh, Chanel. Well, you're on the 15th, right?
We are. The 5 o'clock on the Monday worked out well. If that could be provisionally reserved, if we have overlap or something complicated. Okay. From 5 to 6:30.
You're okay yeah, from 5. Okay, so Bob, you want to put that in at 5 on the 19th too?
And
what am I doing?
And we'll stay until 6:30.
Landmarks on the 19th from 5 to 6:30 if necessary.
Okay.
The 13th works good for the reopening working group. I know I joined a few minutes late, so I don't know if you covered that or not.
Okay.
Wait, which is the date for reopening?
It's the 13th already on there.
13th.
Oh, it's on there. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's on there. Thanks.
Okay. And okay. And so now we can go over to the committee reports. I guess we'll do it alphabetically since I printed out to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Robin, you want to?
No updates except that I'm looking forward to our museum night on the 24th. I hope as many people as possible from the community board can attend. I think it's going to be a really cool night. We've got a lot of good responses, and I think there's going to be some good discussion and interaction between the museums. I don't know if Valerie has anything else to add, but that's all I got.
Valerie, do you want to jump on since you guys are doing that together this month?
Sure. It's the second of the Restarting Together series, and I'm excited to partner with Robin on this. We've had a lot of just good back and forth flow just getting everyone on board. So we have 4 confirmed presenters for next Thursday. We'll have the Whitney Museum, of course. We'll have someone from the Artist Space, the New York City Fire Museum, and the Italian American Museum. Those 4 institutions will give presentations, and then we'll have additional institutions that will be camera facing as well. We'll have someone from the Renee and Chaim Gross Foundation. I don't know if I'm saying that correct. We'll have someone from the Museum of Chinese in America, someone from Leslie Lohman Museum of Art, and someone from the Center for Architecture, or AIA New York, that will be on camera so that the dialogue is really between all of the administrators, with the 4 presentations, and then we'll have more to come on the exact format of that soon.
And then you also have the next meeting, right?
Do you want me to go into that now? Or,
yeah.
Yeah, on Tuesday, October 13th, we're going to be doing an open restaurants update, and we'll want to hear back from the community. So we're going to solicit feedback in the same format as we did for the first initial meeting back in June. At that point, we will have been, as you know, September 30th is when indoor dining will be opening. So we'll be about 2 weeks into that, that's at 25% occupancy. And that will be like 2 full weekends of the indoor dining having been in progress. So that will be interesting to see. And to answer Janet's question that I've seen come up in the chat, the outdoor dining has not officially been extended, though there's a lot of talk and a lot of rumors that a lot of people are expecting it to be extended. While the mayor and the governor did give they gave a lot of notice for the indoor dining coming on board, like a month or almost 3.5 weeks, because of all the ventilation requirements, et cetera. I don't know if we're going to have that much. I don't know if operators will have that much notice, knowing when that extension will happen or not. So as of right now, it's October 31st, but it's rumored that it will likely get extended.
Is that something that, small business should pass a resolution about? Because these restaurants can't survive on 25% capacity. They really need both. I mean, I think likely it will be extended, but should, would it be helpful?
The big issue is the pace at which they open up the inside. That's and go up to 50%, because the rest of the state is at a higher percentage for indoor dining, and that's really going to be the governor and how fast he's comfortable on upping that number. And I think from what he said, that's going to be dependent on his comfort level with the enforcement capabilities. And I'm not sure this is the first time ever that I think the governor has given advance notice of his decision with a date. Otherwise, it's always been 24 hours in advance. And I agree with you on the outdoor dining. I think the issue with the outdoor dining is going to be the structures, because if we get, like a couple years ago, a snowstorm that comes through in the end of October, without, what do you do? What's the plan for the winter? With structures, right? Because you can't plow. And if the city doesn't get plowed, it's like, that storm when, Brooklyn and Queens didn't get plowed, all the streets, and it was a mess.
Well, we don't plow around cars. Cars sit there. They sit there for weeks at a time if there's a snowstorm.
Right, but a lot of the streets have been narrowed so much through the dining, and the snow can't be pushed up against, the snow gets pushed into the cars. A lot of these structures, I think the concern is that the plows will damage them in pushing the snow in. So, it may be that places can have movable stuff. So if snow's, forecasted, they just move the barriers up onto the sidewalk. But these really built out structures are a whole other animal for the longevity of the winter versus something that's a little bit more nimble. I think that could exist, very easily through the winter. Because I don't know, everybody else, I've talked to a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people are really so excited to go eat inside yet. I mean, there may be a certain amount, but I was up in Westchester over the weekend and they had indoor dining and there weren't that many people that were inside. Most of the outdoor dining, even as it was getting chillier, was where most people were eating. So I think that we need to get DOT just thinking about those structures in the mayor. And, you know, I think the big concern is if we get an early storm, it kind of creates draconian decision-making. And that's not a good place to be.
And one thing that we've, you know, because we try to kind of use foresight to kind of figure out what are the big issues. You know, the plows is one that's come up, and you know, there's likely going to be a lot of new operators with new sidewalk cafes that never had them, that are probably going to try to heat their structure in some way that might be illegal. And so that's a really complicated process with the city. And so we're trying to look at existing processes too, that we could help, that maybe a resolution would come out that would help mitigate and help these operators that are already bleeding in the red.
So if there are operators who want to continue, because yeah, there's a freak snowstorm in October, but it's not, you know, it's a freak snowstorm. Should they show up on October 13th to say what they need and what they want? Is that the right forum?
Yeah, I would say that is the right forum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would reach out to the restaurant associates. I mean, I think we could do, you know, just to make sure that they know that this is where they should show up.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it's a, you know, if you remember the last time when we did this, city council was contemplating legislation, but then it was done through the mayor's office. So, you know, any recommendations that we have are ultimately going to the mayor's office on this. And I don't know, doesn't seem to have been a lot of planning on just about anything, but going through the winter, it just seems to be the nimbleness, right? If you've got a couple of warm weeks, everybody wants to take advantage of that. And if it's cold, you know, for a few weeks, you don't want to have that, you know, in such a way that it's like we haven't had much snow, right, in the last few years. I mean, if memory serves me right. And, you know, but some of the past years when we've had those couple of snowstorms one after another, just planning in advance for what happens during that. Because once the snow falls and everything freezes up, it's impossible to, you know, deal with that. So it doesn't take much forethought to come up with a plan, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. So it might be good to hear from operators too. You know, some of them have built these very extensive structures that, you know, are right up on all the lines on smaller streets, and maybe they have some ideas of how that can be worked around, just as far as the structure is not getting taken out by snowplows. You know, I mean, that's I think the big thing. And also the sanitation trucks and the fire trucks. You know, it's mostly, the issue is almost exclusively on our narrow residential streets. It's not obviously on the avenues. So it's a really unique circumstance in Little Italy and a lot of the West Village, where there's just one lane that goes through.
Thanks.
Robin, did you still have your hand up?
Yeah, well, I had a question about the heat lamps, if there was any movement as far as like how that was being handled. That was slightly addressed. And then I was wondering about the operable doors and windows, the French doors, where we have stipulations about them closing at 9 or 10. I'm wondering if we're going to be easing those restrictions during indoor dining, partly because that will actually help, you know, getting fresh air in. But so I don't know if that was something we were thinking about at all or what, but.
Yeah, I mean, the heat lamps, you know, Valerie had put together some information on that in the past. I don't know if people, so the only outdoor portable heaters have to be plumbed in to your existing gas line in your building. You have to have somebody certified by the fire department to operate the heat lamps. You have to have an architect draw up the plans. You have to have it plumbed in. So it's not an easy, it's not easy to do. There's also electric heat lamps, which, you know, are also there, but I think that's a fairly heavy, I'm not sure what permitting needs to be done to install that as far as the electrical wiring and stuff like that. But the portable propane heaters are not allowed in New York City, and I would venture a guess that the FDNY is not going to revise their policies on the propane heaters, you know, the propane tanks. I think that's a big safety concern, particularly in the storage, you know, in the limited space, and we don't have outdoor areas for that type of stuff in the city. And, you know, you're not allowed to bring propane tanks through any of the tunnels or I think across any of the bridges. At least I know for fact that the tunnels, you can't do that. So it's not as easy here as it would be, you know, outside of the city. And as far as the open windows, I mean, I think that the issue driven around there is music. And so, you know, if places are adhering to background music, I don't think that that's going to be so much of an issue. But if it does become that, that's you know, that's what those stipulations are there for. So that's really businesses, you know, conducting themselves properly. And that's been a big thing with the liquor authority right now, is that because the indoor dining is for restaurants, that their view on music has been very draconian, and that is what constitutes congregating. So that's where, you know, if I don't think that's as big of an issue at this point. But we'll see. You know, we'll see as we go forward. I mean, I don't know, the rest of you guys, it's chilly out, right? You know, and that just happened in 2 days, and before we know it, it's going to be really cold out. So just see where that takes us. Is there anything else? Okay, I'm gonna move on to Janet. Did you want to? You're next on the alphabetical list.
No, we've covered. Thank you.
And land use, Frederica.
Hi, everybody. We had a good meeting a couple weeks ago. We are discussing the Loft Board and their intentions to make some change to the rules of their administrative code. During the meeting, we had a brief presentation of kind of the history of the Loft Board. We have some statistics about the number of units that have been removed and number of current units. We identified some issues to clarify around proposed changes and around the IMD, the interim multiple dwelling process. And next month we have 274 7-Elevens, one at 5 Mercer and one at 6163 Crosby. And we have one of the good faith marketing effort things at 65 Spring. And that's all I know about for next month.
That's a full agenda.
Well, we have some precedents that we can pull out of our hat.
Susanna, you had a question?
I did, but I'll save it.
No. Okay. Thanks, Frederica. And Chenault?
We had a meeting with Nothing Remarkable, and a meeting with a new building in Soho that was quite remarkable. And there's enough to fill a drama series even. Thank you,
Can you
Carter,
tell us
for
the address, Chenault?
Grand Street,
72 Grand.
73,
72.
23.
72 Grand Street.
72 Grand.
Yeah. Long history.
And it's very involved with a fire and tear downs and preservation. And we're working on a great tome of a resolution. And otherwise, we just don't know month by month what's coming up. So we're standing by.
Great, thanks. Bob and Donna? SLA?
Yeah, hi everybody. A couple things. It was a fairly, I guess it's going to be fairly quiet. There is one application where there was a split vote. It's like a tavern wine license on Sullivan Street. There may be some people who come to the full board because the committee ultimately approved the license and they were against it. And then one of the things that came up at our meeting, there was one application with, the credibility of the person wasn't all that great. And she was, when she was being asked questions, pointed questions about her experience and, things dealing with the specifics of her plan, she started saying that, well, I don't really understand English very well. And, it was a unusual situation. And then, of course, committee members, the discussion came up about having a translator for her. And so I don't know about what you folks think about translators, but I don't, maybe Bob Gormley can chime in, but this is an issue that's never come up. I think there are a lot of pitfalls with us having translators for applications, but it costs money as well. So that I think is the rest of the applications are unanimous. I think the split vote, there will be a resolution that will explain things and people can figure it out when they get that opportunity. I think that's it.
Hey, Bob, doesn't the borough president's office, they can offer translators, right? Is that a?
I'm not certain. I mean, we've never had, I think many years ago, we might have had someone who did signing. We've never had someone who translated into another. I take that back. I think there was, we did have some Chinese translators for meetings several years ago.
I think we had last year with the street vendors.
Was it that recent?
We have somebody come in from the borough president's office with Rosie.
That's right. It was last year. You're right. That one was arranged through the borough president's office, but I don't know if that's a service that they always help us out with. I'm not quite sure what the process is, but I don't think it comes out of our budget. But I have to look into it. Bob, do you know if is there a chance that they're going to come back next month?
She is coming back. She speaks Hindu. There's real question about her credibility as to whether it really is a translation issue. But be that as it may, that came up. And so I wanted to bring it up to other people and see what they had to say.
If it's something that we may want to help them with, if you could let me know. I mean, I'll look into it anyway, but I'm not sure how much lead time I need to kind of arrange for something like that.
Donna, did you?
They have not, our committee is wondering, because she had these issues, if we should be providing a translator. She did not ask for a translator, and she had a friend there with her that was translating for her. So my issue with this would be, if she's not asking and we're offering, how are we handling that for every other applicant who comes up that may not speak English exactly properly, or that speaks it well enough, but we may not understand, So whatever we decide to do here, I think the equity of it for everybody coming up needs to be considered.
All right, Valerie?
Yeah, I think we went into a really scary area of judgment here that can be misconstrued in a really bad way on behalf of the board. So I think we've really got to be sensitive to this. I'm like reading something about this type of thing with race and in one of my master's classes, so I'm hypersensitive to it. And I just think that in general, we should have some sort of process that we outline how this is handled. I don't know the specifics with this. I know you've mentioned Hindu, and then Donna gave a lot more context to it, that it was something that we were then offering on behalf, and that gets really tricky. But I think on the website, we should have something very clear that says, if you need, if you request services, like, this is the way to let us know. And then let's figure out now, before it becomes an issue right in our front door, because it could get really messy.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a policy in place. I mean, Bob, if you can find out from the president's office.
I will.
Susan?
Yeah, I want to add more context to this because this was not something that came up during the meeting. This was something actually I raised in an email that was going around. And I said that I thought that she should be advised to bring a translator next time to ensure that that we weren't misunderstanding her and that it was complete communication. I certainly want to be reasonably accommodating, but this is, I don't know that we have an obligation to provide this service. And we're opening ourselves up to a huge issue. I mean, she is seeking a license, and it is only fair to, I mean, we're advising her to bring a translator. But to all of a sudden, it seems like the conversation switched to, it's our responsibility to do that. And if before we do anything, I would really expect to get guidance on this from a legal authority before we jump the gun.
Well, I think, yeah, getting from the borough president's office, just, you know, the question comes down to who's paying for it and can we do it? You know, I mean, I think it's the right thing to do. And we should just, if it is something that we provide and the city provides, and, you know, we just need to find out what the policies. Typically, in my experience, and I don't know with Bob, it's typically people usually bring somebody who's a part of their group or business partner or their attorney or, you know, somebody who's already familiar with what they're trying to do. It's not generally somebody else. So it's rarely been an issue, but I think it's something that we should understand what the obligations are. And if we have obligations, then we should put that information on our website and just move forward. You know, I mean, it's.
Carter, sorry,
Yeah.
I can't raise my hand. You know, this is exactly, well, I don't want to speak for Patricia and Mar who are here at the meeting, so they want to jump in. This is exactly the kind of topic we should be and we want to address in the equity working group.
Well,
So
I don't think it's a topic we just need an answer to and then put the information on our website. It's not, there's a process in place through the city, I'm sure, that has an explanation on if you require translator services, is it provided or not? And if so, how is it provided? And, you know, is it something about who pays for it? It's
actually, I don't want to take up too much time, but maybe we could talk about this offline. You know, it's part of a bigger conversation about accessibility for everybody who wants to participate in the meeting. So this is just one element of that conversation.
right, but I don't think anybody's in disagreement, right? If it's something that we're required to offer it, then we put the information available forward for that. I mean,
I'm just saying
I think
that
Carter's point is that this is a citywide issue. This is not a CB2 issue.
right.
It has to be a citywide policy for equity reasons, and we should follow whatever that policy is.
Right.
I'm not gonna.
Susan, so you're
No, I was just saying it's important to recognize that there is a distinction between situations where it is a responsibility because someone's rights are in concern versus a situation where you're seeking an application and the burden may be different. I think we need more clarity on what we're going ahead before just volunteering things that we may not be able to keep providing. Because the bigger issue many times becomes, once you provide something, you've got to keep providing it.
But if we're required to provide it, we just provide it.
Well, that's true. That's true. But we need to
put out information, which is what Bob, you know, we want Bob to find out what the position is. I mean, and
right.
It's Mar? We can't hear you, Mar.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. Janine just said, whenever we have school meetings, you know, be it the PEP or the CUC or any meeting, there are translators provided.
Right.
Anything that has to do with the schools. And I don't really understand why we, as a community board, right, people tasked with serving the public, right, don't also offer this service to people who need it. And particularly in SLA, I mean, I understand what Bob's saying about, you know, we're opening ourselves up, but perhaps there's a disclaimer. Maybe we have a suggestion. If you need a translator, please bring one. And if you can't provide your own, we'll provide one for you to the best of our abilities with a disclaimer. But we should definitely offer it because it is an equity issue.
Right, if it's offered by the city, because ultimately it comes down to who pays for it.
Yeah.
You know, that's. I mean, that's. I don't disagree with you, but that's, you know, that's what it comes down to. And that's something that I think I'm just very curious to see what their answer is, because we've had, you know, the borough president has stepped up and done this, but I don't know if it's selectively on their part or if it's policy. And so, you know, I think it's, you know, we'll find out, I guess, when Bob makes the inquiries. Matt?
Well, all I was going to say was back Amy up a little bit and say that I actually do think this is a prime candidate for the equity working group for exactly this reason, which is I think we want a discussion about this. Is this a priority for us? Do we want to figure out a way? Because if we put our heads together, I mean, you can call NYU and see whether they have student translators. You know, I mean, there are ways to figure this out if we want to make it a priority. And so the question of, is it required, obviously is an important question, but is ensuring that people who come before us, maybe not in every instance, but I would think certainly with advance notice in public session, is providing those people who can't speak English equitable access to local government an important thing, and I would argue that it is.
Well, the point is, though, is that if we have the money for it and the services, then we just do it.
100%. I'm with you there.
That's what I'm saying, is that that's what we find the answer to.
100%.
Frederica?
I think that if
Yeah, can we just, this hasn't been such a common request that we need to make a rush decision. So I think we'd be better off contacting the borough president's office, finding out what the situation is, and then discussing it further rather than imagining.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And so when we hear back from Bob in the next day or two, I can, you know, bring it up at the next executive, or even Bob can even just email the executive committee and we can go forward from there. And if it's something that we need to put on as a topic at you know, the equity working group or at any other committees, we can do that, you know, going forward. But without that information, it sort of seems, I think we wait for that. Does that sound good, Bob?
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Okay, Donna, did you have anything to add to Bob?
No, I don't think so. Just next month looks busy, so I think we're going to need the 2 nights, which I should have said at the calendar, but you didn't ask. I think it was it's kind of apparent.
Yeah,
I think it worked this time doing it for one night. There might be a general consensus that if we can do it in one night, it might be better just get it all over with in one night. But the way it looks right now, next month we're going to need the 2, I'd say.
I think there were 26 that were on that list.
23 or something, yeah.
It's a big number.
No. Are you back?
Rich, Parks?
I don't think there'll be anything confrontational coming out of our meeting. We had an update from the Parks Department on some projects that are underway. But before they got into it, I guess the most interesting aspects is before we got into the projects themselves, Steve Simon, who's the Chief of Staff for Manhattan, explained that how the budget issues have been hindering the progress, both in terms of maintenance of parks and of projects that are underway. He explained that the cuts, which have been substantial to the Parks Department, have you know, limited or actually stopped the annual hiring of the 1,700 seasonal employees that look after open spaces in the summer. And he mentioned that all capital budget cuts have stopped all renovations of existing parks. anything that's not in construction phase or has not been awarded is stopped. So that sort of set the tone for the meeting. We discussed DeSalvio Playground, Duarte Square, Little Red Square, the water tunnel sites, the reinterment of some remains that were found in Washington Square Park, and a few others, smaller things.
Tony
The
Dapp,
overriding
right? Renovation of Tony Dapp or some repair.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Father Demo Square, the Pasanante ball field can't be done. Mercer Playground can't be done. It was that sort of thing. You can read it in the notes. I think the biggest question is not on the projects as Carter may have said at the start of the meeting. It's more on the how the parks get maintained. That might be a discussion that comes up and people concerned about what they're seeing going on in Washington Square Park or other parks. But and our committee's been discussing that sort of offline, in email. But so that was the topic. I think the other big news is just that if you hadn't seen it, the big news in the Parks arena is that Diana Taylor, who's been the chair of Hudson River Park Trust board for many years, has left and is being replaced by a person who is the New York State DEC chair, the Department of Environmental Conservation. So that's the biggest sort of news of the last couple of days.
Yeah, we'll work out close to now.
And do you get any, I'm what we were bringing up at the beginning as far as the district needs, the budget priorities, et cetera.
Yeah.
Is there any insight from the Parks Department on what we can advocate for?
No, they they haven't said anything, and in fact, all they've said is what they can't do. They can't hire anyone. They can't replace anyone. So in the case of George leaving Washington Square Park, they can't replace George. The PEP officers that they have on have to cover more spaces because PEP officers that have left that are covering other parks need to be covered for. Ms. Flores, who has been covering a lot of, is backfilling as much as she can. I think we're going to end up having to face questions like, closing the park at night, which is something that, we brought up and people haven't always embraced, and that might have to be reconsidered. We're going to have debates, I'm sure, about asking NYU to do more to maintain the park, which is a topic that some community members have consistently expressed concerns about, NYU taking over the park. But now, and I think going forward, as we look at not just Washington Square Park, but others, there's going to be a question as to whether or not more conservancies are beneficial in terms of upkeep and maintenance of parks. And again, thinking back on some of the vitriol that was dished out to the people who started Washington Square Park Conservancy, we're going to have to anticipate this debate. Because I don't think, what I was saying today, what we don't know when we say that, parks should be given their money back, the parks budget should be reinstated. And when de Blasio gets the money that he's borrowing from the state, they should, refill the budget gap in the parks. I always find it very difficult to opine on that because I don't know what the trade-offs are. I don't know if that means teachers can't get hired. I don't know if that means police don't get hired. I don't know if that's a trade-off against sanitation. But what we do know is the Parks Department was cut $85 million, which is 14%. And we know sanitation was cut 106 or 105. So that's having an effect on parks. And the only other thing that I was reminded of is, the conservancies that do exist are not allowed to do anything on their own. All they can do is supply money to the Parks Department, who then gets to decide how to utilize it.
That's what I ask is with the conservancy for Washington Square Park and NYU, how do those sort of intersect in that with the funds that they do have now? Can those be allocated in other ways, or?
It's up to Parks Department. Yeah, NYU goes into a certain, it goes into an account that Parks Department can utilize, and Conservancy makes money available at the discretion there and based on the priorities set by the Parks Department for Washington Square Park. So it used to be that George would say, boy, I'd really like to get a new device that would break up the hard ground in the dog, run. But if I put that through the Parks Department, it's going to take, 3 years. And they'd say, oh, well, we can buy that for you. Or he'd say, boy, it'd be really great. I don't have enough of a time from a gardener from the Parks Department. They'd say, oh, we can get a gardener. We can fund a gardener. But they would just give the money to Parks.
Got it.
So, yeah. So that's the challenge.
Well, it's been interesting because one of the concerns about conservancies has been if there's a private organization providing funding, is that going to let the city off the hook? Well, now we have a situation where the city is going to be making drastic budget cuts. So the role of the conservancies is actually going to be, helpful. And
yeah. I think it will be. And I think Washington Square Park's somewhat of a unique example. I think some of the smaller ones, what's done at Jackson Square or Abingdon, those places where they have great sort of friends groups that oversee it. But even then, there have been times where I know Jackson Square was accused at times of pushing homeless people out of the park, and that was wasn't well received. So there are challenges whenever these groups get involved too. But I think Jackson Square and Abingdon are the two best examples of friends groups.
Maybe one of the meetings that we have in the next couple of months is inviting all those groups in and figuring out which parks may not have friends groups or need some help, because if the budgets are really getting cut as they are, and we're starting to see, the sooner we activate people in the community who want to help out and participate, the better off we are without things slipping.
Yeah, we've had them in, and I think they all should be brought in, and they should all be celebrated once a year. I forgot though what they do at Sheridan Square has always been incredible, and clearly what's not all of them, there are a few, but Jackson Square is always a good one. And so we should bring them in, and we should learn how they do it. We do have some issues though with when groups get involved, right? Jane Street's one. What's the other one that?
The garden.
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Jefferson Marshall Garden.
I know. I was just teasing it. Yeah. So it's a line that sometimes they get a little protective of it or a little controlling of it, but those that have friends groups tends to be well maintained.
Bob, I see you've got your hand up, and then I've got a couple of committee members.
Yeah, there's an issue I wanted to raise. At my district service cabinet meeting, when Jamal Patterson gave his report, he mentioned specifically that at Pasanante Ball Field, they had confiscated some of the props that the skateboarders have been using. The skateboarders left them there overnight, so Parks just took them, and Jamal wanted to make mention of that. I think in part because skateboarding is an issue I raised with him many times, especially in the past year, because we've gotten a lot of complaints about skateboarders in Washington Square Park, and it has been a problem there. But I got to tell you, it just so happened that in the past week when I've been just walking through there to drop some stuff off with Doris, it's out of control. Garibaldi Plaza is out of control, and even when George was there, it was something that he felt it was beyond him. I know he was frustrated because he felt he had said that he reached out to the 6th precinct, a number of times, and that they didn't seem to have the stomach to do anything about it. But it's been given up. That property has been ceded to skateboarders.
Yeah, PEP officers don't try, and police don't feel it's within their scope of responsibility. And the best hope we have in the short term is, as Shirley mentioned in the thread today, is just the colder weather and some return to school, I suppose. But it is a terrible thing, and it destroys. They really do damage to some of the benches or some of the stonework. Yeah. You know, we had a big outcry when the PEP officers, you know, tried to apply, you know, to enforce some of the rules. And so they, Parks backed off a bit and the pendulum swings back and forth. But I think on skateboards and to some degree bikes as well, there's just very little enforcement at all. So.
Yeah, and my concern has always been that eventually, well, there have been a couple of assaults. I mean, there was one that was made it into the press about a year or so ago when a park department landscaper got assaulted by a skateboarder, being hit by the skateboard. And I think Josh was in the office one day when a guy came in and lifted up his shirt and showed some bruises that he alleged had been he'd been attacked by a skateboarder when he told them they weren't supposed to be there. But my concern is not assaults like that, but just, you know, someone walking through that plaza who thinks they have a right to the space and gets knocked over because it's so chaotic. I mean, we're talking about, I went through there last night about 5:30 and there were dozens of skateboarders either in Garibaldi Plaza or bleeding out over near the fountain. It was, we're not talking about one or two, we're talking about a couple of dozen.
So what do you suggest, Bob? I mean,
I don't have any more. I've been banging this drum, Rich, at my meetings for the past year, and I've gotten nowhere. I think my personal opinion is the only way to kind of get anything done would be if the precinct had the desire to do something. But clearly, even 6 months ago, they didn't. And now with they seem to have stepped back on a lot of fronts. So I don't see them being very active at this point in time.
Yeah, unless the elected officials, you know, weigh on them. And again, that's our elected officials are elected to, you know, weigh their priorities and weigh their trade-offs. And I spoke to Pat about it the other day in Corey's office, spoke to Eric in Corey's office. You know, they have to be, you know, if it's a priority, and maybe this goes back to the original conversation. If this is a priority for our, you know, for our community board, and maybe there's a process by which we express, you know, our sense of what the priority should be. Though again, I always worry that I don't know enough about what the trade-offs are. You know.
Well, I think it is something.
That's an excellent point that you bring up, Rich, and it's something that everybody on the board should really keep in mind. Is we advocate for specific things. At what expense does that happen? Does that come from?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a very careful.
That's always the unknown. But I assume that if Deborah's going to be asked to vote on borrowing money, and if Brad's going to be asked, or you know, and I'm assuming the council speaker knows what those trade-offs are, and they're making, you know, prioritization, you know, decisions. Right. But again, the question is, how do we opine without? I don't, you know, I think we have to do it in a tactful way. We have to say this is something that needs to be considered. Maybe it's not as important as teachers, or maybe it's not as important as more police, or, you know, and remember, the mayor really doesn't control that much when it really comes down to it within the budget stuff, especially in difficult budget times. The mayor has very little discretion outside the uniformed services. So
I've got 4 board members with their hands up. Yeah. So start with Patricia. You still with us?
Yes, I'm here. What my point was about something earlier that you discussed, but then we moved on to the other committee report. My point was, you said that Bob was going to look into translation services with the borough president's office. What if he comes back and says they don't want to pay for this? Then what do? We've wasted another month, perhaps, and this issue is still with us. How are we going to address that? And then, but then I have another question also. And then, as a point of order, I've heard from other people that there are, when a woman is speaking, someone will interrupt them to finish their sentences. And I wondered how we could address that in our community board, because this has happened over and over again. As a point of order, I'm not sure how we should address this going forward. Going back to you, Carter.
Sure. How would you like to address it? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, when it's happening, how would you want me to call it out? I'm like, if it's happening live, like, how could I make that point known to you when it's happening live? Should the person who's talking realize just say that, call it out?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, one of the things is that when we have had our meetings in person, it's just more of a roundtable discussion, and with Zoom, and with the participation, it's much larger, you know, as far as the number of people that are in the room. So I think that that's, you know, if we want to have it more of a formal meeting, we can certainly do that. I mean, that's you know, one of the transitions of going from meeting in person into a virtual world.
Okay, so when it's happening live, that person should just say point of order and just address it to the chair? Is that what I'm understanding?
Sure.
Okay, okay. And then my other question about the translation services, we'll hear back from what the borough president's office says and then move forward. What if it takes a month before we hear that answer?
It's a policy that they either have it and it's available or it's not. And once we have that answer, then we can figure out what we do going forward.
Okay.
It's in place or it's not. It's either that it's funded by the borough president's office or it's not. I mean, these are not just brand new issues. And when we find that out, and we can also find out as far as the budgeting for that, what the expectations are for that. We don't, in our board, have that issue as much, but I can tell you that it's definitely an issue in other boards, so that they're already, this is already, you know, there's a procedure and policies in place that we can look to. And if it's something that doesn't meet our expectations of what we should be offering, then that's something that we can address. I mean, ultimately it comes down to the paying for it, which is really the big issue. And, you know, if that's the case, then we can look to other groups that might want to provide services, you know, as people had suggested, we can go from there. But we can find out what the general policy is from the city, from the borough president's office, you know, and what it is that we offer for those services. I mean, that's, you know, and you know, it's not something, I don't think, I'm sure Bob will get an answer tomorrow on that, or if not, within 2 days. I mean,
okay, well, is this something that I should bring up in the bylaws working group to discuss further?
Well, I don't know how it would be a bylaws issue as far as having interpreters.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a point of order. I can't raise my hand. Patricia was responding to something I texted her about. I don't think this was meant the way it felt. However, Carter, when I start talking about if translators should be addressed in the equity working group, you cut me off and talked over me. When Matt backed me up, he was allowed to speak at length, and he spoke until he was done and he was not interrupted. So I just like to point out that I don't think this is meant in a negative way. I don't think it's purposeful in any way. However, being a woman and working in the professional world, this happens all the time. And it may just be a social thing, the way we're socialized, but I would hope that the chair and the vice chair in the future would be more careful. And I'm gonna go to Janine's suggestion is, why aren't they be on the lookout for this and step in? So thank you, Patricia, for bringing it up. I appreciate it.
Okay, do you guys want to discuss it more, or is that, I mean, I certainly understand that it's you know, it's as far as, you know, for, in this particular case, it's finding out an answer. And then when we have the information, we move forward. I mean, that's, you know.
It's not about that, Carter. It's about that I was cut off by you as I was talking. And then Matt, thankfully, I really appreciate the support, said that he wanted to elaborate on that, and he was allowed to talk at length until he was finished without being interrupted.
Okay, so, and would you like me to respond? I mean, I'm not sure what you want me to do. So that's what I'm just asking.
No, I'm just, we can talk about it offline. If you would like to respond, that's great. I'm just giving you an example of something that happened tonight that I've heard from many women on the board. Happens all the time. So that's it. I'm just calling it out in the moment.
If that's a complaint people have for me, please send them to me. Please let me.
It's you, but it's not just you. It's not just you, Carter.
But I mean, if you're directing this at me, please let me know. Anybody, if you think I'm doing that, interrupt me immediately. You have, everybody has my permission to do that. So I just say that right now. So that's, you know, to Mars, I mean, to Patricia's point, when she was saying to me, it's like, if you want a point of order, bring it up with me then. You know, I have no problem with that. That's
Okay, I just did. Thank you for being open to hearing me.
Thanks. And then I've got Valerie, get your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. My point was like way before all of this was about the community gardens, that with people moving in and out of the city and going different places, that I did hear a concern while I was out volunteering this past Saturday cleaning up with Corey's office, that just some of the different community gardens. So I'm not necessarily saying we need a meeting to hold them in, but if our office or if the board can be a place to connect people, maybe through our mailing list, maybe we list the groups, ask if they're looking for volunteers, and maybe just list those. That was just a really simple thing from quite a while back. And then my second point was about the skateboarders. I think I challenge everyone here to think long and hard about that, regardless of what the stated rule is there in Washington Square Park. If we want this city to be devoid of culture, I think skateboard culture is a very big part, especially downtown, about what makes this city great. And by no means am I talking about the bad actors and the extremes there, but I would say think long and hard about that, because what we do advocate for, and that's come up at a meeting we've had with the 6th precinct before, that they pay attention to what we direct them to, and that so I would just say think long and hard about that. I think there's a way to all peacefully coexist, and I think that skateboarders do have a place in our community, especially in Washington Square Park.
Okay, and then Susanna.
Hi, I have another comment about skateboarders. We've been talking about skateboarders for a long time. I don't think that enforcement is ever going to resolve this. I also think that skateboarding is not a nefarious activity. It's just a question of where and when. I don't know if the skateboarders are organized, but I think that we should be proactively seeking them out and hoping that they have some form of organization that can speak with one voice. And we should consider possible ways to accommodate them. Maybe there's a way to protect a part of Washington Square Park from damage, and to allot a certain area of Washington Square Park at a certain hour to be dedicated to skateboarders or whatever. But I think that we have been complaining about this for a long time, and it's not going away. These are not bad people. They're doing something healthy and nice, and we should think about how we can live, how we can accommodate them.
Janet.
So I actually posted in the chat. So I agree with Valerie. It's part of the vibe. I love them, and to point out for our equity group, these are Black and brown kids, most of them, and they do mostly do it in their like 2 different places. So and I just want to second just Valerie and point out that this is somewhat of an equity issue, and enforcement is kind of dangerous topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Mar? We're having trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I don't know that this is an equity issue, and I don't think that, I think it's a pretty diverse group. I don't think most of the kids are Black and brown, but I was many years ago in the 80s one of those skateboarders, and it would be great if there were some accommodations for them and a special place for them in that park, because they are part of the history and part of the fabric of that park. And I also want to say that I walked through the park around midnight the other night, and there were actual organized parties going on. So more of a concern were the hundreds of NYU kids and other kids with DJ set up, shoulder to shoulder, no mask, clustered throughout the park. I actually had to walk out of the park and walk around. There were so many people. There were kids on every lawn. I mean, groups as big as 20 and 30 laying around. It's not safe. I don't mind the music and the partying, but it is not being done in a safe way and well into the night. They weren't, you know, it was midnight when I walked through and they weren't even close to stopping. So I don't know. That's all.
You know, Mar, you bring up a good point. I ran into somebody who had organized, that I met through a friend, one of those events, and they seemed to feel that they had permission to do something from some of the parks employees earlier in the day, you know, that people have been asking about stuff. And I think that that's something we need to find out a little bit more information about, because there is no space to do anything, right? You know, outside's where we have to do it, and we need to find out a little bit more about what's officially and unofficially happening in the park with respect to that, because that's a really a good point. And I don't think that some of the groups intend to be bad, you know, and to have situations out of control and creating messes. But then there are some too who don't care. But it'd be interesting to get to the bottom of that. Rich, you want to?
Oh, I think I'd go back to what Bob said in the beginning. Just when we talk about safety, I do think that I hear from people in the park the concern that they're going to get hit by not just a skateboarder, but by a bike that's going through the park. So I'm all for finding space. I'm not sure if Washington Square Park's the right place, but the key is that it be done in a way that that the skateboarders are safe, but also the other people in the park are safe, that they don't get accidentally bumped into and knocked over.
All right, don't see any other hands. Joe, quality of life? You're muted.
Hi, everyone. We just have a couple of resolutions. One was for a mural in Gansevoort Plaza, and the committee actually split 4-4. So it'll be up to the board to vote on a decision on it. It's a Stella Artois mural that would be on a raised platform in Gansevoort Plaza. There was concerns about the safety of it, and then the original intention of the mural, it was done in London. Was to encourage social distance drinking in London, which, you know, has a much more pervasive culture of drinking on the streets than we do. So that was a concern brought up at the meeting, and concerns about the platform being raised, maybe being dangerous for people with strollers and just passerbys. So I'm writing a neutral resolution for the committee to look at, but ultimately it'll be up to the full board to pass a resolution for that. And then the others was a unanimous decision about projected video advertisements for Stone Island, which is a clothing company that has a storefront in Soho. That one people were pretty unanimously against, but that's all we have.
Great. And what do you think about the idea of having ESNY coming in next month to give a...
Yeah, that'd be great. And then we also, Bob said we had an organization reach out about having, there's Community Board 4, I think, has started to advocate for moving trash, instead of trash building up on sidewalks awaiting collection, to move it into the curb lane, so that pedestrians don't have to navigate around, you know, huge stinking bags of trash, and rather use curb lanes that are right now just used for private car storage, to try to improve the quality of life of pedestrians. So that's something too we're discussing, to bring to one of our next meetings as well. But maybe it'd be a good opportunity to have both if the DSNY was there to hear about this idea. And maybe Shirley, I mean, Shirley's committee also would have to be involved because it's a DOT controls the curb lanes and the quality of life is sidewalks. But we can talk about it. I'll send you an email, Shirley, to discuss.
Okay, and then Rob, you had your.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment to Joe that that Stella Artois promotion reminds me. Several years ago, there was I think it was Absolute Vodka. They wanted to put a billboard-sized sign in the Gansevoort Plaza. And when I called DOT and I said, I see Donna shaking her head, she remembers this. I asked, not DOT, I called SAPO and asked them, or maybe it was DOT, what are you thinking with that? What are you trying, what message are you promoting with that or conveying with that? And they said, well, it's to promote safe drinking. And the sign was about 3 stories high and the safe drinking was just a tiny little 2 words, I think, at the bottom of the billboard. So I don't know if this is quite the same thing as the Stella Artois, but sometimes I think they get their priorities mixed up when they're promoting things over in the plaza.
It's also the bid, you know, the Gansevoort bid is the one co-sponsoring it with Stella Artois. So, you know, and the drinking aspect is somewhat diminished in the rendering that they showed us for the project they're proposing. But, you know, I included a picture of it in the resolution so everyone can see. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Donna?
The issue with that one that I really saw was that the bid is not the ones promoting it, but you know, so Artois is promoting it. So it, you know, you have no control over what they're saying, and that seems to be the bigger issue than actually what they're putting on the ground in my mind.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. Schools and education, Janine? You're muted, Janine.
We did not meet this month, but Patricia and I participated on the community board 4 call last night, and they had the guy from, or at least the point person for Open Streets for Schools, and it's actually outdoor learning. And we learned that the schools that it's still a couple hundred, if a school applied for more than their playground and they didn't already have a play street, in most cases they were only, they were sort of responded to, but we have heard that a few schools have heard. PS 41 got their open street, 75 Morton City School got JJ Walker, but they want more and they haven't heard on that, and still waiting to hear from the other schools. So they're getting, you know, but we also have the name, and each school would individually contact the police precinct, the relevant precinct, to get the barricades that they need. And Betty has a great idea for next month, is really talking to students, and hopefully by then most people will have started school. It's been, by the way, 6 months and 2 days since public school students have attended class, which is a huge amount of time. Anyway, so that's our October plan, as well as capital needs, and sort of getting to the bottom of what's happening to the funds that schools got in 2019. And does that mean the money that they also were allocated for FY20 that would be released in February, will they get that as well? So those are our big issues.
Great, thanks, Janine. Any other, you know, every time I talk to any elected official or anything, the schools come up. Is there anything that people who are not thoroughly involved in this issue should know as far as, you know, where the school's reopening stands? I mean, you don't have to answer that either, but it's.
There is nothing to, I mean, you know, it'll be what it'll be, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's just chaos for families. I mean, we found out yesterday the schedule for tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, which is like 10 to 11:30 a.m. So it's not real school. And my 7th grader will have a 4-hour and 15-minute school day, which is really, really short. I think he went to nursery school for 5 hours a day, just to put that in perspective. So there's just a lot of strains on parents and students, and that's just the logistics, not getting to the education, but to be continued.
Robin, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, not to add to your plate as far as answering anything, but at this point, given the kind of learning that's been going on the last 6 months, is there any data yet or any expectations that kids are not at the level they would normally be? Like, is there any concerns at this point?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, of course, there's huge concerns. I mean, I have concerns. Every parent has concerns. You know, one of my kids is hanging out with a friend, and every day he has lots of enrichment and tutoring to make up for what he's not getting at school. I should share. Community Board 4 is doing some great work there, working with the DOE and local teachers colleges to pair up student teachers who are normally already gone through the sort of background check to work with pods at Title I schools in Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen. So that's a good thing. But if you don't have a student teacher, it's the parent or it's nobody. So yes, people are falling behind, but nobody's measuring it. Younger kids aren't learning to read, and they're not learning other skills, and older kids are having all sorts of struggles. And you always hear this sort of one-off, like there's the kid who's a super introvert who thrives in remote learning. And obviously those are those students out there. There's still no guidance for District 75 schools. There's still no much guidance for students with IEPs. It's a mess. Will kids be allowed to be held back? Do they want to be held back? These are all sort of bigger picture questions. I think that in general, people with resources are going to get their children the additional help they need outside of school, and the people who don't will fall through the cracks.
Great, thanks, Janine. Susanna.
Hi. We don't usually have a committee meeting before our full board, but we hastily arranged a meeting tonight, just before this meeting, because we've been waiting for a while for the Department for the Aging to put out a concept paper about rethinking senior centers, and they did. We were not notified of it, which is really annoying to me, but we learned about it. And so we put together this meeting. We were hoping that people would come just from the general public. No one did. So we had a conversation with the staff of Margaret Chin, who chairs the council's Committee on the Aging, and with the leadership at Greenwich House. It's an interest. We did not have a quorum. And an aside to this is that, especially with Tom gone, our committee is really quite paltry. So if there's any way we can get some additional members, that would be great. There were like 4 of us there. So you will all get this resolution on Thursday. We wanted to take a position on it. Some of the ideas in the concept paper are really interesting. It seems to be a response to what we've heard in the past from Greenwich House, from our service provider, that DIFTA contracts are ridiculously Byzantine and complicated, and there's not much flexibility to be able to tailor a program to the specific needs of your community. So we think that that's an encouraging thing. Sorry, there's a band on the street outside of my house. But we also heard a lot of concern. So there's a concern that this concept paper will lead to an RFP that's going to be released at a time when nobody knows what a senior center is going to look like. Nobody knows what our needs are going to be. So I'm going to try to reflect all of that in a resolution, encouraging them for thinking innovatively, and also recommending that they not release a new RFP this fall, because there's just too much going on with service providers trying to cope with the needs of seniors today. Does that make sense? And then in October, we are going to have a meeting with an update on street homelessness from our outreach team from the Manhattan Consortium. It seemed to be a very hot topic in the news over the summer, especially. People have come home, presumably, or not come home now that it's fall, and we figured that before there's a crazy rumor mill going, we should just talk to the people that know. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Susanna. I don't see any hands up. And then your meeting is also next week as well, right?
Yeah, and so right, exactly. So we had very quiet summer, and we're making up for lost time. So we have a meeting next Tuesday, and that's the meeting about homelessness. And the meeting today was about seniors, or actually DIFTA is considering new nomenclature that would call them older adult centers. And there are a lot of interesting questions about who should senior centers be servicing? Should they be servicing a large, younger population? Should they be serving an older population that has different kinds of needs? Should they be, should their different centers offer different things? So there's a lot of questions and interesting ideas around it. Greenwich House is in the process of doing outreach among its membership, but their membership is like 17 to 1,800 people, and the older adults in their catchment area is about 10,000 people. So there are a lot of people in our district that are not, or in our neighborhoods, that are not availing themselves of the senior centers. And Greenwich House wants to know, is that because they don't know about them? Is that because they're not interested in them? Is that because they can't get to them? And that conversation would lead to a conversation about who should we be serving? Should we be serving people who want intellectual activity, who want socialization, who need health services, and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of broad thinking. There's new leadership at Greenwich House since January of 2020, and they are trying to innovate.
Great, thanks, Susanna. Shirley, traffic?
Yeah, I guess first I'll tell you about the past meeting, then I'll tell you about the future meeting. So the past meeting, we had a tremendous, very concerned turnout for a DOT presentation proposal to reverse University Place one more block so that vehicles could turn east on 12th Street. This came about because University Place had been reversed one block south, and vehicles couldn't go anyplace if they wanted to go east. They had to turn again right, in other words, west, and then head south someplace until they found an easterly bound street to continue on. So this was why DOT was suggesting the extension and the turn on 12th Street. And folks were quite concerned because they feel that 12th Street is a really congested street. For one, there's tremendous placard parking there. For another, it's an emergency route for Northwell Health to get to First Avenue and the hospitals, and on and on and on. And there was one more thing, though, that was quite interesting. Many of the attendees said they would object to having a shared street going all the way from 14th Street down to 8th Street. So that's what we recommended, among other things. And we feel that the shared street at least would give a little leeway for vehicles heading down to have a choice of where to turn and maybe alleviate some of that congestion. So, okay, that was that. And now coming up is Revell Scooters, and they have been given the green light to operate in the central Manhattan area. And their folks are coming to give a presentation on their safety plan. And we hope to have some folks from DOT as well giving their slant on this too. In addition, we're having, we've been requested by some folks from Disney for the development of 250 Hudson, and they would like to remove a bus stop to the M20 temporarily to facilitate their developing. And they have to get our approval and our written approval, so they are coming to ask for it. And that's about it.
For the bus stop, can that be relocated nearby there?
They're not asking for that, and they have a rationale as to why it's not necessary because they feel that there's a bus stop close by on Charlton Street that can serve in the meantime. And we'll hear more when they come to talk to us.
How long is the turnaround on that, you know, to remove that? Does that happen fairly quickly if it's
It will happen quickly because they've already gone to DOT, and DOT said we have no problem with it, but you have to go to the community board and get their approval. And we had to have a public hearing, obviously.
Yeah, I was just bringing it up because I saw, you know, some of the discussions on the reliance on overnight bus service in place of the subways being closed. And I wasn't sure, you know, I don't know specifically on that line, but I've just become much more aware of the importance of the buses. And if this keeps going for some time, or where the subway closed overnight, it's just, so that's why I was just curious. You know,
That's so far what we have in information from them. They are insisting Charlton Street will do fine. They're also saying that people never cross Canal Street to access that bus. You know what? I don't really know, but we'll hear more when they come.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shirley. I'm going to call on Mar next, and Patricia for the Equity Working Group. She's her phone. We can see her, see that walking outside. Mar, Patricia?
Hi. So, yes, we are, sorry, yeah, let's stop. Chris and I were actually on the 4th, so I was still outside. That down.
You're very faint, Mar. I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Hi. So we're meeting on the 23rd. We have actually been able to collect most of the processes and those questions we asked answered from most of the committees. So we will be able to present on that day. And going forward, are we doing dates for October now?
I think that the date that had been on the calendar that was the 28th, which was the last Wednesday.
Can we do the 27th or 29th?
The 27th, so then Janet, that would put you in the 26th or the 28th. Would that work for you, Janet? If they...
We'll take the 28th too, right? We said the 26th,
Right.
just not the Wednesday.
Just not the Wednesday? Okay, with Janet, how does that?
The 26th or the 28th, that's fine.
Okay.
I don't see.
So Bob, you want to move the equity to the 27th then? Nope, I don't see Bob. All right, I'll bring that up. But
I'm making the change right now.
Oh, you are? Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, so you're gonna do that on the this month instead of the other.
Yes.
Okay.
Back this month.
Okay. And okay, anything else?
No, we have some things in the works, but we're not ready to share yet. So stay tuned.
Sounds good. All right, thanks, and thanks for letting me know so you guys could give your report.
Thank you.
And then going down the list, I've got the bylaws working group.
Yep. We had a meeting yesterday on short notice because we had gotten some feedback from the borough president's council, and there were 2 points that we agreed needed change. The first one had to do with having a secret ballot. According to the council, our elections are they are discoverable under FOIL. They are not purely an internal matter, and as such that a secret ballot would run afoul of the city charter. Therefore, we are proposing to basically replace the language currently reads secret written ballot. It will now, we recommend it will read open written ballot, which will restore basically what we had before we attempted this change. The second point had to do with simply there was an ambiguity in the electronic voting section. There are two concepts in there, a voting period and a voting window. And what happened is that when we added the extra feature to have the district manager reach out to try to contact by phone any board members whose ballots had not been received, it created a sort of a inconsistency where ballots, votes could be received after the voting window, which would theoretically invalidate them. So the language has been revised so that now the voting period in which ballots are being accepted will end once the effort to reach out to people via phone is concluded, assuming that is needed. So it's not a big change. I had sent out revised text to the working group early today, and I will prepare something in a report that will be circulated. I will try to get it out tonight, so you'll have it all tomorrow. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Susan. Dan?
Yeah, Susan, it's funny, I had a conversation with David Gruber about this, and he said something to the contrary. I don't know enough about the bylaws, but I was hoping that you can share with us the language that you're discussing and you're talking about the secret ballots. If we could all see that and actually examine it, that would really be helpful. Because, like I said, I heard something like 180 degrees different from what you're describing.
Well,
but I don't know enough about it.
Sure. Just as background, David has been sort of the driving force behind the dominant interest in having a secret ballot. It's something that, based on the experiences of a few board members over the years, the working group didn't find it objectionable, but in light of the legal opinion from the borough president's office, we don't really have an option. It's something that is part of the open meetings law. The way it reads, it simply said that there's a sentence that says, in our current version, voting shall be by secret written ballot, and it will now read, voting shall be by open written ballot. And that's the difference. I think David has been trying to make the argument that requiring, providing access to who votes for whom will violate people's privacy. He's very passionate on it. I have had a chance to, briefly look at the FOIL statute, and in my opinion, he's misreading it too. This is his idea of why this should be exempt is not really contemplated by the law. And statutes like FOIL, because they're designed to create access and promote access to information, exceptions are always construed narrowly. And he's trying to provide a very broad, he sees it as much broader than it is. But in any event, in good conscience, I am not going to second guess the counsel from the borough president's office.
So there are no other community boards that have voting that is non-anonymous.
Okay. Somebody needs to mute themselves because I'm hearing background noise. Thank you. It's a good point. And in fact, one of the reasons I think the working group was comfortable supporting the idea of a secret written ballot is that there are other boards that have it. But the fact that they have it doesn't make it legitimate. It doesn't mean that it's permitted. And I am going to assume that boards, you know, they do their bylaws revisions, and it doesn't, just because they're doing them doesn't mean that they're going to consult with counsel from some city office or entity. So it's just because they have it doesn't mean that they're allowed to have it. And I think, in fact, people, you know, the borough president's office should be made aware of this, because those people are, yeah, they're violating the law.
Who was the name? What was the name of the council that you spoke to at Gail Brewer's office?
It's Adele. Is it Barrett? Is her last name? Carter.
Adele.
Yeah.
So one of the things that she had also pointed out, that the board members are known to the public, and therefore there's nothing to shield, because we're all, you know, board members that are widely known. And the provisions, I think that that when we were discussing it, she had said that we don't fall under those exceptions, because we're the ones making the votes and we're known to everybody. And this also came up as a result of discussions that Adele had, I think it was during Borough Board, and so I'd called her up afterwards or I'd sent her our bylaws revisions, and she said that she felt that the secret provision violated the open meetings laws, and was fairly confident in that. So we did a call with David, and you know, the other issue here is that the committee discussed this at length yesterday, and the idea is, do we want to be the ones fighting this to show that we can do it versus amending it? You know, who wants to lead that charge of fully researching this and justifying that it is in fact appropriate? So that was the other aspect of it.
Carter's right. This is also just simply a practical side to this. If we are going to hold our ground, that means we're putting up a challenge, and we would have to fight this. This is a legal matter now. So you know, you have to pick and choose your battles.
I need to learn more about it, I guess. Okay.
Well, I mean, it brings up an issue where if we have a vote that could be challenged, right, by anybody who says no, that doesn't conform, then what do we do? I mean, it creates a situation where we want to have our voting process, you know, follow what the guidance of the borough president is and their interpretation on that. I mean, if that's something that we want to argue, that somebody's got to really go out and research that and do that. I mean, but that's
one of the reasons that I think that it was passed as a resolution in our last board meeting is because you want to avoid any repercussions taken against members that might not vote for somebody who are in the position of power to move them from a committee to another committee. And by doing it blind, protects that individual from any kind of retribution. That's the purpose of it. So we're not asking for any kind of blind voting outside of our own elections. I thought that was a pretty good argument that we heard. But I don't know enough about the legal ramifications of it that probably are legitimate, that Susan's speaking about. I think that either I have to speak to David, I have to speak to someone in the Gail Brewer's office and to learn more about it. And, you know, it doesn't seem like there's any wording that says specifically that we can't do it. We just have to fight for it. But other community boards do it. And I don't know the reasons why they actually follow the anonymous voting for officers as well. It just seemed to make sense to me. But it seems like I have homework to do. So, but thank you, Susan, for all your
No problem. I suggest that you look at FOIL, because you will see the types of things that are excluded, and you may have a sense of it. reach out to Adele. She is going to, she's more knowledgeable in terms from a legal perspective. I agree with you. It's a good, it's a sound reason to want to protect board members from retribution. But it does, if you don't have the option to do it because, we have chosen to serve, we put ourselves out there under current interpretation of the law, we may have to simply, that's what comes with the territory, basically.
Right, and to just Janet's point, what right now in the past when we voted, we've written by we vote by written ballot, right, which somebody signs their name to in order to make the ballot valid. And when we do that and the ballots are collected, it isn't announced who votes for each person, just the results and the numbers, but those ballots are foilable. So it's not necessarily widely known to anybody unless somebody went to the board office and actually examined the written ballots. And so that's also by virtue of the record that we keep, so that whoever has been voted for. Also, Adele had brought up on our call another issue, which is the public's right to know who's voted for the elected officers, given the power of the different officers under the city charter. And so that was the body doing the election, as a public body doing that election. So the question of the FOIL aspect, really, I think what Susan went into, it's like that's where Adele was saying that she felt fairly confident that the FOIL rules did not protect anybody.
To sort of elaborate, the only things that are normally protected from discovery are those types of votes taken in executive session. And as Adele pointed out, an election cannot occur in executive session. The reason we changed the term from executive to business is because it is still publicly accessible information. True executive session means the public is excluded. So, when we have personnel meetings and we vote on things, that is an executive type of a meeting. But all of our other meetings are not executive.
And the board positions are not considered personnel because we're not hired, we're elected. And so that was another distinction. So this was the whole, issue. Is it worth doing all this and having something on the bylaws that runs contrary to the advice of the borough president's office and their general counsel?
I have a question. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you say other community boards do this?
In my review of other boards' bylaws, I cannot tell you which ones offhand have it, but I did discover that more than one other board in Manhattan has it. But how they got it, why they got it, whether anyone has ever asked, can they have it, is unknown.
Wouldn't it be worthwhile to ask them about it? I mean, if we want to have it. Well, whatever boards have it, why they do have that in their bylaws.
Well,
would they be helpful?
They may have good arguments. I mean, we had good arguments for why we promoted this. But it's still, again, it comes back to the fact is, if it's not permissible, it's not permissible. We do have, yes, we don't want to have retribution. We want to encourage, free choice, people following their conscience and voting for whom they choose. But it all comes down to what's the framework in which we function. I think, if anything, borough president should be reaching out to checking to see other boards and determining what happened. I mean, I'm personally, I'm just not, it's not a fight I'm ready to take on.
Bob? Ely? Oh, you're muted, Bob.
No, there we go. Okay, I had a little trouble getting it off. Yeah, so I guess I get what you're saying, Susan, in terms of the fight, probably unnecessarily fighting something on this front. But in terms of FOIL, I mean, there would be ballots. It's not like it couldn't be foiled. Am I not correct? I mean, if somebody wanted to, it would be our obligation under FOIL to provide the information. But until that time, why do we have to show it?
Well, we don't just show it. I mean, this stuff is kept, it's just simply kept in our records. It's a question of if somebody, you know, makes the effort to go look for it. And you know, as part of our records, you know, all of our voting records are accessible to the public, always have been. So, you know, it really comes down to an interpretation of the law and whether or not this can, you know, this aspect of what we do, it meets one of the exceptions, you know, and therefore can be withheld, you know?
But we wouldn't be withholding it. That's all what I'm saying. We would be providing.
Well, if we didn't change if we didn't change the language that we approved last month, what we would be doing is we would have ballots where you couldn't identify who voted for what. I mean, and that would be the problem, is that you wouldn't be able to know these things, unlike any other vote that we take as a board where we know who voted for. You can figure it out based on the attendance and who's in the majority and the minority. You can work it out.
But couldn't we get around this by allowing to have ballots, and be it that it be permitted to be foiled, and if somebody wanted to do that, they could. And I just think, you know, I get the secret part of it. That's we do not want to be in that situation where somebody tries to foil this and we're not providing it. I think that is something I wasn't really promoting that aspect of the idea, but I think, isn't there a way to figure out an alternative here?
Well, we don't publish in our minutes who voted for what. These are simply records that are kept that should someone pursue a FOIL request, they will they will have access to those ballots. But we never publish. We only publish the results, the numbers, you know, the final tally. That hasn't changed. We don't have an affirmative obligation to say who voted, you know, for candidate A versus candidate B. It's simply that the information exists should someone try to get it.
I guess what I'm saying is, why can't we make it so that nobody on the board can see it, but that anybody from the public can see it? If they want to ask for it, they can. That's all. I'm just thinking, like, is there a way to get around the reprisal issue? Is the concern, and so I don't know. I mean, it just seems to me, I never thought for a second when I promoted it, or at least when I argued in favor of that it would not be foiled. That you wouldn't be able to foil it. So I'm not absolutely certain myself, but I appreciate everything you're saying. It's a tricky issue.
But yeah, I mean, if
raised something there that how can it not be accessible to board members but be accessible to the public? I mean, every board member is a member of the public. I just say that because right now.
No, but then people would know who did the foil. That's why. Because you would make a FOIL request, that's why.
Gormley, just not to confuse the Bobs, has been you know, district manager for some time. And Bob, how often have people asked to examine the voting card?
One time, but the person who asked never came in to actually look at the ballots.
So I mean, that includes everybody, correct, Bob?
That does
you know,
board members, members of the public, the entire, you know, so, you know, and it's also, I would hope that the board's not electing a chair, that they're so concerned that they're going to be taking those actions. You know,
You know, I think in this case, the remedy is the fact that if you have a chair who is retaliatory, that's something that gets brought to, you know, the right people's attention when it comes time to reappoint somebody. The mechanism for dealing with somebody who behaves that way isn't through you know, hiding the information. There's, you know, it's by challenging them when they, you know, if they seek reappointment.
and Adele had also brought up a point, and I don't think we're doing a very good job of articulating it, that the public has a right to know who and how our body came up with its leadership, and who voted for the leadership, as opposed to members of the public voting for our elected officials. And so there's a distinction that she made. I can't articulate it very well because I'm not an attorney, and she had articulated that, I think, much better, and had pointed out that that was part of the public officers law and the FOIL requests, et cetera. And so, Valerie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that it just seems like you could just get a relative with a different last name to foil it for you. But then what does that say about you? I guess it's a board member, so I don't know. That's it, just a comment.
And Joe correctly brings up the fact that there was an article in the Villager that did have a breakdown of votes for chair. Do you remember what that was from, Bob?
I don't remember that at all, to be honest with you.
So, and I know Lincoln had mentioned that that Artie had shared, you know, the votes with him at some point, and that was Bob's predecessor.
Right.
And I forget what exactly he had said. He put it in the chat during the last meeting.
Right.
Valerie, anything? No. All right. Anybody else on this?
I mean, I'm happy if someone wants to, you know, ask me further questions offline, happy to do it, you know, as I gain better, clearer understanding of this myself.
And just as far as correcting this, the reason that we wanted to correct it is we're going to be voting not in secret by the electronic voting, but this was for in-person voting, which is not going to be, you know, happening at least in the next few months until the governor changes his mind. Dan?
Just, yeah, one last thing. I think Bobby really brings up an interesting point. If the other community boards are able to vote and they're anonymously, but yet the information is still available through a FOIL, it sounds as though they're meeting the criteria in which that they are still voting in a public manner, but we actually don't know the answer to that question.
Well, that's how we used to vote.
So in other words, they're voting anonymously to their board, but it's still accessible as information. In other words, you can still find the code and find out who voted for whom, and it's still part of the information. It's just not publicly accessible. We don't know how those other boards we don't know if their resolutions are saying secret, or we don't know that true definition of what we're asking for. We're just trying to protect members from who may not vote for the eventual chair to have reprisals. That's pretty much it. And if it has been a problem in the past, and I think David was the one who brought it up, and actually I thought it was for you too, Carter. I thought something happened to you. It maybe
well, mine was on the being appointed to the board, and that was from the borough president. It wasn't, you know, the elections were open on that, but it was being appointed to the board. And I think in David's case it was as well, you know, that he had raised that, and it was being appointed to the board because of the elections occurred the month of the appointment.
Well, maybe to Bob's point, maybe the language is it's not secret. Maybe the secret is the wrong word. Maybe anonymous is the wrong word.
Well, secret simply, in this context means that it's not discoverable. That's the thing, is that we
Right.
don't.
So it should be discoverable. I
violation.
get that. Yeah. Okay.
So-
Thank you.
And by open, it doesn't mean, you know, we can choose to not, we don't have to have a name printed on it. You can, we can issue codes to people so that each person has an individual code assigned to a ballot. That wouldn't violate it either. The point is that whatever we use is at some point, you know, available for review.
I mean, and for example, if somebody were foiling the ballots and then they just foil the codes, and I mean, you know, and I had brought this up with David, it's sort of the pretend secret, you know, but the idea is it's either known or unknown, but creating steps to make it harder doesn't protect or result in that. And so it seems like putting those steps in place doesn't make much sense to try to circumvent the intent of what Adele was saying, which was that the voting shouldn't be secret. And that was something that she had brought up with all the boards. I went, you know, and because it happened, you know, right after our meeting. So I just went and asked her and sent her what we had sent, and she said she didn't believe that complied. The other boards have not gone to pursue with the borough president, you know, their interpretation. And I don't think that the borough president goes out and reads everybody's bylaws to weigh in on them. So that's you know, why this issue came up. And then we had discussed that it's better to correct it now while this is in process, instead of having something that's against the borough president's, you know, recommendations or interpretations of the law. I mean, maybe there's other people that we could seek out information from, but.
Yeah.
All right, and let's see. Anybody else on that? No. So I think I had covered everything, and all the committees. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to raise?
Yeah, Carter, as you know, I had to work late today. I don't know if you announced the new chair of Hudson River Park, the chairperson of the Hudson River Park Trust.
Richard brought it up.
I did it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't want to say, I wasn't sure. Have you met the commissioner of the DEC?
We did you met him too. He was sitting at our round table when we were talking about Pier 40.
Okay.
But the executive committee is inviting Basil to a meeting for the Hudson River Park Advisory Council.
Yeah.
And
I didn't share what you had said about, you know, why you had said you thought it was good to have, you know, somebody with that background. I didn't share that.
it's terrific to have someone that is interested in the waterways, clean water access. The DEC is exactly kind of the issues that we've been fighting for so long. And, just a note, I am having, breakfast with Madeline on Thursday, and we'll see how she feels about it. I'll be happy to share that.
Sounds good. Yeah.
I hope that, the chair of the DEC is a park being a park, right? Not park.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had been head of River Keepers, which is a great organization, and I think a lot of the challenges the park was having, as you'd mentioned to me offline, were run-ins with environmental concerns. So this is a good way to sort of solve some of those.
One thing that everybody should be aware of that is in our catchment is that one of the big things is lack of transparency. I think everybody read that Village Sun article. And the trust is planning to put underwater estuaries and oyster bays between North Moore and Canal, and which Canal, a little bit north of Canal as well. And for them not even to mention it, to send out an RFP and to start putting in these buoys without talking to CB1 and not talking to CB2 about it, just issuing an RFP, is exactly the issues that I think a lot of people have problems with. To change the routes of ferries and where they're going to dock without thinking about where historic vessels are actually berthed is a real problem, which are damaging not only these boats, these historic vessels, but also the piers themselves. So the advisory council is just asking them to talk to experts on GPS mechanisms so that these fast moving ferries that have a lot of wakes don't actually disrupt all these very important historic piers. And we're hoping that we have a better listening ear. And we already do, because Noreen just today wrote a 4-page response to a request that was written 2 weeks ago in how they're learning and they're willing to have an open mind now that there doesn't seem to be a roadblock, which just seemed like Diana Taylor was very much about the commercialization of our park, and maybe we might see something slightly different. We'll find out more.
Bob, Ely, you have a question?
Yeah, I think you just answered the question. I really wanted to ask Dan, and I think we got it from the two of you guys. I appreciate that very much. And so my take is its environment is going to be taking over for development. That's the kind of the way I was seeing it, but I appreciate you got your 2 cents on that.
It's just all it is right now. We'll find out more.
And we were talking about sort of sanitation and garbage and stuff like that. How are budget cuts in the park? You know, what's happening there with the, you know, even with their trash pickups and just general overall?
Great question. So budget cuts are not hitting the park. Actually, when I brought up that our West Street on the east side of West Street is lined with overfilled garbage cans, and I actually brought it up at the meeting and sent pictures. They were unaware of it, and Noreen offered to put additional trash cans on the Hudson River Park side, because it's pretty obvious that a lot of that garbage is coming from the pedestrian traffic going over to the park. So we'll see if we get those cans, but there was a request during the advisory council meeting to put more cans at all crossings.
It's why would they not have any budget cuts? Is that because it's coming from the state, or what's the
It's a different budget, you're right. So it's state budget, it's not city budget. What do you say? You disagree, Rich?
Well, there's it's 50-50 on the capital funding. On the maintenance, it's you know, it's somewhat paid for by the activities in the park, and then it's filled by state. Yeah. So I don't think the city doesn't have the ability to cut the budget.
Better said. That's kind of where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I conclude. I've come around to that. Yeah, that's right. Which is unique. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to conclude the meeting? To Susan and Donna and Dan, and a lot of people have their hands up and waving.
Yes, let's motion.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
We'll see you on Thursday.
See you Thursday. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.